They thought they had buried me in the Basilica of Santa Croce 5 centuries ago. They thought my words were merely ink on parchment, destined to be debated by dusty academics in quiet libraries. They were wrong. I am Niccolò Machiavelli. I have walked the corridors of the Vatican, stood in the shadow of the Borgias, and survived the rack of the Medici. I have seen how kingdoms are won with a smile and lost with a blink. For 500 years, I have watched humanity repeat the same errors, clinging to the comfort of goodness while the ruthless inherit the earth. I have returned not to comfort you, but to strip away your delusions. You feel weak. You feel broken. You feel like a victim of fortune's whims. I am here to tell you that your pain is not a burden, it is a foundation. Listen well, for I am about to hand you the keys to a kingdom built not on prayers, but on the cold, hard reality of human nature. This is the science of the shadow. This is the virtue of the exile. The world is a graveyard of perfect men. Look around you at the polished facades and the digital masks of strength. They tell you that to rule, you must be without blemish, a statue of marble and gold. They lie. In my time in the courts of the Borgias and the Medici, I saw the truth. Perfection is a brittle shield. It shatters at the first blow of fortune. Most men fail because they spend their lives hiding their flaws, stitching together a coat of mail to cover a rotting heart. They are terrified that if the world sees their stutter, their poverty, their trauma, or their physical frailty, the world will devour them. I tell you, a prince does not hide his wounds. He sharpens them into daggers. True virtue, the raw, ruthless prowess of a leader, is not the absence of weakness, it is the mastery of it. Your flaws are not holes in your armor. They are the trap doors in your castle through which you drop your enemies into the abyss. If you are viewed as flawless, you are a target. If you are viewed as broken, you are a predator in a lamb's skin. Today we shall unlearn the morality of the weak and embrace the realism of the strong. I will show you how to map the terrain of your own inadequacy and build upon it an empire that the perfect could never conceive. Listen closely, for the fox knows that the trap is set not where the ground is firm, but where it appears to give way. Lesson 1. The Fortress of Flaws. To build an empire, one must first understand the geography of the battlefield. In the art of war, the most dangerous position is not the open plain, but the narrow pass, the place where a massive army is forced to squeeze through a tiny opening, losing its momentum and its numbers. Your weaknesses are your narrow passes. Most men view their flaws, perhaps a lack of formal education, a history of financial ruin, or a temperament that is too volatile, as vulnerabilities that must be guarded. This is a peasant strategy. A prince maps these flaws and realizes that they are the only places where his enemies feel safe enough to attack. First, you must conduct a ruthless inventory. Take a quill to your soul. Where do you feel the most shame? Is it your lack of social grace, your physical stature, your inability to conform to the norms of the merchant class? In my day, I was a man of the Republic, cast out by the return of the Medici. I was tortured on the Strapato, my shoulders pulled from their sockets. I was a man of broken bones and no official standing. Had I tried to pretend I was still a powerful courtier, I would have been mocked and executed. Instead, I retreated to my farm, embraced my status as an exile, and wrote, "The Prince." My weakness, my exclusion from the halls of power, became the very vantage point from which I could dissect the anatomy of power itself. When you identify a flaw, do not patch it, highlight it. If you lack experience in a certain industry, do not lie and claim expertise. Instead, lean into your outsider status. Proclaim your ignorance as a fresh perspective that isn't blinded by the dogma of the establishment. By openly acknowledging a weakness, you dictate the terms of the engagement. Your enemy, seeing your exposed flank, will focus all their resources there. They will think, this man has no pedigree, he is easily dismissed. Or, she is too emotional, she will crack under pressure. This is where the trap is sprung. While they are focused on your perceived soft spot, you are secretly fortifying the ground beneath it. You are preparing a counterstrike that they will never see coming because they have already dismissed you as a threat. Consider the Scythians, a nomadic people who defeated the mighty Persian Empire of Darius. They had no cities, no fortresses, no strength in the traditional sense. Their weakness was their lack of a fixed home. Darius marched his massive army into their lands, looking for a battle, but the Scythians simply retreated. They burned their own crops and poisoned their own wells. Darius saw this as a sign of cowardice, a weakness. He followed them deeper and deeper into the wasteland, his army growing hungry and exhausted. Only when the Persians were completely overextended did the Scythians strike. Their vulnerability, having nothing to defend, became the very weapon that starved the most powerful army on earth. Step by step, constructing your fortress. Isolation. Identify the one flaw you are most afraid of people discovering. Strategic disclosure. Mention this flaw early in your negotiations or public life, not as an apology, but as a matter-of-fact reality. This disarms the spies who look for leverage against you. The false wall. Create a defense behind the flaw. If your weakness is a lack of capital, build a network of favors and alliances that function as invisible currency. The kill zone. Wait for your opponent to mock or exploit your flaw. At that exact moment, reveal the hidden strength you've cultivated in its shadow. If they mock your lack of polish, show them your raw results that their polished manners could never achieve. If they mock your slowness, show them the depth of preparation that their speed caused them to overlook. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are the architect of a maze. And in this maze, your flaws are the only paths that lead to the center, where you are waiting with a blade. But a fortress is only useful if the enemy chooses to attack it. How do you force a superior opponent to charge headlong into your trap? You must learn the art of the vulnerable mask. Lesson 2. The art of the vulnerable mask. To win a war before it begins, one must master the theater of the mind. In the courts of Italy, the man who beat his chest and proclaimed his strength was the first to find a dagger in his ribs. Why? Because strength is a provocation. It demands a challenge. It invites the envy of the powerful and the desperation of the weak. But weakness? Weakness is a sedative. It puts the predator to sleep. In this lesson, we move beyond merely mapping your flaws. We shall learn how to wear them as a mask, a deliberate, strategic presentation of vulnerability designed to bait your opponent into a fatal overextension. In the modern age, you call this under-promising, but I call it the ploy of the limping lion. Most men are blinded by their own ego. When they see a man who appears wounded, hesitant, or inferior, they do not feel pity, they feel a surge of superiority. This is their undoing. A prince knows that the moment an enemy feels superior, he stops being careful. He stops observing your hands and starts looking at your throat. If you are young, play the role of the naive student. If you are wealthy, dress in the rags of the middle class. If you are brilliant, speak with the hesitation of a fool. By dimming your own light, you force your enemy to step closer to see what is happening. And when they are close enough to smell your fear, they are close enough for you to reach their heart. In the year 1502, I observed Vitellozzo Vitelli and the other conspirators against Cesare Borgia. They thought Cesare was weak, paralyzed by fear after their rebellion. Cesare did not strike back with fire and fury. Instead, he acted the part of the conciliatory victim. He signed treaties. He offered gifts. He looked like a man who had been utterly broken by their betrayal. He invited them to Senigallia for a reconciliation. Because they believed he was weak and desperate for their friendship, they arrived without their full guard. They let their defenses down. They walked into his house like masters, and they never walked out. Cesare strangled them while they were still basking in the glow of their victory over him. This is the vulnerable mask. You do not hide your weakness. You project a version of it that is so tempting that your enemy cannot help but reach for it. Step by step, the psychological maneuver. The feigned hesitation. In negotiations, never appear too eager. Even if you have the upper hand, allow your voice to waver. Ask for more time to think. Let the other party believe they have intimidated you. They will become arrogant, and in their arrogance, they will offer concessions they would have otherwise guarded. The accidental reveal. Let your enemy discover a weakness you want them to see. If you want them to think you are financially unstable, let them see a past due notice that you left out on purpose. They will assume they can buy you cheaply or wait you out. While they wait, you are gathering the resources to liquidate them. The gratitude trap. Act as if you owe your success to your rivals. Thank them for their guidance. A man who thinks he is your mentor will never realize he is your target until the apprenticeship is over, and he is the one out of a job. The sudden pivot. This is the most crucial moment. You must maintain the mask until the very second your enemy is overextended, meaning they have committed their resources, their reputation, or their physical presence to a position they cannot easily retreat from. Only then do you drop the mask and strike with the full force of your hidden virtue. The Greeks could not take Troy with shields and spears. They had to take it with a gift that symbolized their defeat and departure. The horse was a mask of weakness, a sign that the Greeks had given up and were leaving a religious offering behind. The Trojans, blinded by the joy of winning, brought their own destruction inside their walls. In your life, your weakness is your Trojan horse. If you have been fired, do not act bitter, act humbled. Let your former employer think they have broken you. When you launch a competing firm 6 months later and take half their clients, they will be too stunned to react because they had already written your obituary. Do not confuse the mask of weakness with actual weakness. A man who is truly weak is a victim. A man who appears weak is a strategist. You must maintain an iron discipline behind the mask. While you are acting the fool, your mind must be calculating the exact angle of the sun and the weight of your sword. If you begin to believe your own mask, you are lost. The mask is a tool, a piece of stagecraft. Wear it to the banquet, but keep your daggers sharp beneath the table. But what of the internal rot? What of the shame that burns in your chest when you remember your failures? The mask may fool the world, but it does not fool the man in the mirror. For that, you must learn to convert your shame into cold fury. Lesson 3. Converting shame into cold fury. The greatest engine of power is not found in a library of strategies or a vault of gold. It is found in the furnace of your own humiliation. In the courts of my Italy, a man's reputation, his onore, was his lifeblood. To be shamed was to be dead while still breathing. But I observed that most men handle shame like a scorched child. They flee from the flame, they hide their scars, and they spend their remaining days in a state of timid apology. They let the heat of their shame consume them. The prince does not flee the flame. He stands within it until his spirit is tempered into steel. He takes the raw, chaotic pain of his past failures and distills it into cold fury. Understand this. Hot fury is the mark of a beast. It is the man who shouts, who throws his wine, who seeks immediate, messy revenge. Hot fury is predictable. It is a fire that burns out quickly and leaves only ash. An enemy can see it coming from a mile away and simply step aside. Cold fury, however, is the mark of a god. It is silent. It is patient. It is the energy of 1,000 insults, 1,000 rejections, and 1,000 moments of being overlooked, all compressed into a single, unrelenting work ethic. Cold fury does not want to vent. It wants to prevail. When I was cast out of the Florentine government, I did not spend my days weeping in the streets of San Casciano. I felt the sting of the strappado in my shoulders every morning. I felt the shame of being a man who once dined with kings, now tending to a dusty farm. I took that shame, that burning desire to prove my detractors wrong, and I channeled it into the most disciplined routine imaginable. I would spend my days in the mud with the laborers, but when evening fell, I would strip off my dirty clothes, put on my finest courtly robes, and enter my study. In my mind, I was no longer an exile. I was a peer to the ancients. I wrote through the night, fueled by the cold realization that my only path back to immortality was to outthink every man who had ever mocked me. Step by step, turning pain into an iron will. The ritual of remembrance. Every morning before the world wakes, spend 5 minutes looking directly at your greatest failure. Do not look away. Do not offer excuses. Feel the weight of the shame. Let it settle in your gut like a stone. The vow of silence. Never speak of your ambitions or your desire for revenge. To speak of it is to release the pressure. You need that pressure to build. When people ask how you are doing after a setback, smile and say, "I am content." Let the fury remain internal, powering your movements like the hidden gears of a clock. The transmutation of labor. When your body grows tired, when the hustle feels hollow, reach into that reservoir of shame. Remember the face of the person who doubted you. Remember the feeling of being less than. Use that memory as a second wind. You are not working for a paycheck. You are working to build a world where those who dismissed you must eventually ask for your permission to exist. The erasure of the victim. Stop using the language of trauma. A prince has no trauma. He has intellectual data. Your past pain has taught you things about human nature that the comfortable will never understand. You now know exactly how people act when they think they have won. This is your greatest advantage. The Siege of Tyre. Alexander the Great arrived at the city of Tyre, a fortress on an island. The Tyrians mocked him from their walls. They felt safe. They believed Alexander's weakness was the sea. He had no fleet to reach them. Alexander did not react with a tantrum. He channeled his fury into a feat of engineering that defied the gods. He spent months building a mole, a land bridge, through the sea to reach them. He turned the ocean into solid ground through sheer, grinding, cold persistence. When the bridge was finished, the Tyrians realized their mistake too late. Their mockery was met with total annihilation. Your work ethic must be your land bridge. It must be so massive, so undeniable, and so relentless that it crosses the impossible gap between your current shame and your future empire. Shame is a debt you owe to yourself. You pay it back by becoming so powerful that your past is no longer a story of failure, but a legend of origin. People love to see a man rise from the ashes, but they only respect him if he brings the fire with him. Do not seek healing, seek ascension. You have the fortress, you have the mask, and you have the fuel. But a prince without a target is merely a madman in a basement. You must learn the most delicate art of all, selecting the right enemies for your weakness. Lesson 4. Selecting the right enemies for your weakness. A man is defined not by his friends, but by the quality of his enemies. If you choose an enemy too weak, you gain nothing from the victory. If you choose an enemy too strong, you are crushed before you can learn. But the Machiavellian prince does something far more subtle. He chooses enemies whose strengths are perfectly neutralized by his specific weaknesses. In the theater of power, most people flee from those who possess what they lack. If they are poor, they avoid the rich. If they are uneducated, they avoid the intellectuals. This is a catastrophic error. You must seek out the very giants who look down upon your flaws, for it is only by toppling them that you claim their territory. To manipulate your weakness into an empire, you must become a hunter of specific archetypes. You are looking for the overextended titan, the enemy who is so confident in their traditional strength that they have become blind to the unconventional dagger you carry. Power makes men rigid. The more a man relies on his strength, be it his vast wealth, his corporate title, or his social prestige, the more he becomes a slave to the rules of that strength. He must maintain his image. He must follow the best practices of his rank. He must act dignified. This is your opening. Your weakness, your lack of status, your unconventional methods, your willingness to get your hands dirty allows you to move in ways your enemy cannot. You are a guerrilla fighter in the jungle of high society. You must select an enemy who is heavy. A heavy enemy cannot pivot. A heavy enemy is predictable. A heavy enemy is a target. I recall the rise of Julius Pope II. He was known as the warrior pope. His strength was his terrifying temper and his massive armies. Most men tried to oppose him with their own armies, and they were slaughtered. But the true strategists, those who understood their own weakness, did not meet him in the field. They met him in his ego. They acted as the humble servants of his grand vision. They submitted to his outbursts. By playing the role of the weak subordinate, they gained access to his inner sanctum. They influenced his decrees while he thought he was commanding them. Their weakness, lack of official sovereignty, allowed them to inhabit his shadow, where the real decisions were made. Step by step, the strategy of selective conflict. 1. Identify the stiff giant. Look for an opponent who is obsessed with their own perfection. This is often the industry leader, the popular rival, or the boss who relies on fear. Their weakness is their inability to be low. They cannot handle being mocked, and they cannot handle an opponent who doesn't play by their gentlemanly rules. Your lack of a reputation to protect is your greatest weapon here. You can say and do things that would ruin them, but only make you look like a scrappy underdog. 2. The bait of the easy target. Once you have selected your giant, you must make yourself visible to them as a nuisance, but a weak one. You want them to engage with you publicly. Why? Because when a giant fights a dwarf, the giant loses no matter what. If the giant wins, he is a bully. If the giant loses, he is a laughingstock. By appearing weak, you force your enemy into a PR nightmare the moment they acknowledge you. 3. Exploiting the blind spot of success. Successful people assume that because they are winning, they are correct. This is the hubris of the fortunate. Select an enemy who has been winning for a long time. They have stopped innovating. They have stopped looking behind them. Your weakness, being new, being hungry, being untested, allows you to experiment with radical tactics that the giant would consider beneath them. While they are polishing their trophies, you are digging a trench under their pedestal. 4. The pincer of public perception. In the modern world, the weak have a unique power, the power of the narrative. If you are flawed, use it to build a tribe of other flawed individuals. Turn your weakness into a banner. Select an enemy who represents the elite or the uncaring. By positioning your weakness against their cold perfection, you turn every blow they strike against you into a rallying cry for your growing empire. You make it the people versus the machine. David and the armor of Saul. We all know the tale of David and Goliath, but we miss the Machiavellian lesson. Before the fight, King Saul offered David his own royal armor, the strength of the establishment. David tried it on and realized he couldn't move. He realized that if he fought like a soldier, he would die like a soldier. David rejected the strength of others. He chose to remain weak, unarmored, carrying only a shepherd's tool. Goliath the giant looked at David and felt insulted. He saw a boy with a stick and laughed. His strength, his heavy armor and massive reach made him slow. He expected a close quarters brawl. David's weakness his lack of armor, gave him the speed to stay out of reach and the freedom to use a projectile weapon. David didn't win despite being small. He won because he was small enough to be underestimated and fast enough to exploit the giant's inability to adapt. You must understand that people want to follow someone who has struggled. A leader who has always been perfect is unrelatable. He is a statue to be toppled. But a leader who says, "I am as broken as you, and that is why I am dangerous," creates a cult of personality that no amount of money can buy. Choose an enemy who is above the common man. Use your weakness to bridge the gap to the masses. Your empire is built on the backs of those who were also told their flaws were failures. By selecting a perfect enemy, you become the champion of the imperfect many. In my writings, I often spoke of how a prince should handle injuries. If you must hurt a man, do it so severely that you do not need to fear his revenge. When you use your weakness to trap an enemy, do not do it halfway. If you are the weak startup taking on the strong corporation, do not just aim for a market share, aim for their soul. Use your agility to expose their corruption. Use your humble origins to make their board of directors look like out-of-touch aristocrats. Make the very strength they spent decades building, their size, their history, their bureaucracy, the very weight that pulls them to the bottom of the ocean. You have mastered the terrain, the mask, the fury, and the hunt. You have cleared the field of your enemies by using your very scars as bait. But there is one final, terrifying step. To ensure your power lasts centuries, you must turn inward. You must build the empire of self-mastery, where your weakness is no longer a tool, but the very foundation of your eternal legacy. Lesson 5. The Empire of Self-Mastery. We have arrived at the final gate. You have learned to map your flaws like a general, to mask your intent like a spy, to forge your shame into a furnace of labor, and to hunt the giants who are too rigid to swat a fly. But now we must address the most dangerous enemy you will ever face, the man you were before you understood power. In the courts of the Medici, I saw many new men rise. They used their wit and their hunger to seize a throne, but once they sat upon it, they grew soft. They began to fear their old weaknesses. They tried to erase their history. They surrounded themselves with sycophants who told them they were now perfect. And in that moment of self-delusion, their empire began to rot from the inside out. The final lesson of the prince is this: your weakness must never be discarded. It must be institutionalized. You do not move past your flaws. You build your empire upon them, ensuring that the very thing that once made you vulnerable now makes you invincible. Most men, once they achieve success, want to hide the fact that they were once poor, or uneducated, or rejected. They buy the finest clothes and mimic the speech of the aristocrats. They try to fit in. This is a betrayal of your virtue. If you try to be perfect like the old elite, you are playing their game on their home court. You will always be a second-rate version of them. But if you remain the outsider king, if you keep your weakness as a central part of your brand and your strategy, you remain a unique force that they cannot replicate. Look at the great founders of dynasties. They did not pretend to be blue-blooded. They leaned into their roughness. They made their lack of refinement a sign of honesty and strength. They turned their weakness into a new standard of excellence. To master yourself is to realize that your weaknesses are actually your unique competitive advantages. UCA. If your weakness was a lack of focus, you do not force yourself to be a bureaucrat. You build a chaos-based empire where your ability to pivot and jump between ideas keeps your competitors in a state of constant confusion. If your weakness was a cold or antisocial personality, you do not try to be a charismatic glad-hander. You build an empire based on ruthless efficiency and objective data, making your lack of emotion your greatest selling point in a world of soft sentimentality. Step by step, consolidating the internal throne. 1. The audit of victory. Success is a perfume that deadens the senses. Once you begin to win, you must sit in the dark and ask, am I winning because I am pretending to be strong, or because I am utilizing my actual nature? If you find yourself imitating your enemies to keep your power, you are losing your sovereignty. You must return to the fortress of flaws. Reinforce the idea that you are winning because of your unconventional nature, not in spite of it. 2. The guarding of the hunger. Your greatest weakness was likely your lack of something: money, respect, or love. This created a hunger. Once you have the empire, the hunger will want to sleep. Do not let it. You must artificially maintain your weakness. This is why I wrote that a prince should sometimes go hunting in the rugged woods or live simply among his soldiers. You must keep the memory of the wound fresh. If you become too comfortable, you lose the cold fury that brought you to the top. 3. The selection of the broken counsel. A prince who only hires perfect resumes is a prince who will be betrayed by those with no loyalty. Build your inner circle from people who have weaknesses similar to yours. Hire the man who was unjustly fired. Hire the woman who was told she was too aggressive. These people have the same shame to fury engine that you do. They will be more loyal to you than any polished professional because you are the only one who sees their flaw as a weapon. 4. The legacy of the flawed idol. When you build your public legacy, do not allow the historians to polish you into a saint. Reveal your struggles. Reveal your dark side. By being the first to admit your shadow, you make it impossible for anyone to use it against you. You become an idol of realism. This creates a bond with your subjects, or your customers, or your followers that is deeper than mere admiration. They don't just follow you, they identify with you. The architecture of the Roman arch. Consider the Roman arch, the greatest architectural feat of the ancient world. What is an arch? It is two weak sides that are literally falling toward each other. In any other context, this would be a collapse, a failure. But the Romans placed a keystone at the top. The weight of the falling sides pushes against the keystone, and the more weight you put on top of the arch, the stronger it becomes. The weakness, the gravity pulling the stones down, is the very thing that holds the bridge together. Your empire must be a Roman arch. Your flaws are the leaning stones. Your self-mastery is the keystone. Without your flaws, the arch has no tension. Without the tension, there is no strength. You do not need to fix the leaning stones. You just need to ensure they are leaning against the right center. You began this journey as a man who felt less than. You felt the sting of your inadequacies. You thought you were broken. Now, look at the empire you have built. Every wall was laid with the bricks of your rejection. Every tower was funded by the cold fury of your shame. Every victory was won because you were weak enough to be underestimated. You are no longer a man trying to survive his weaknesses. You are the architect who has used those weaknesses as the foundation of a new world. The perfect men are gone. They were too brittle to survive the change of the seasons. But you, the imperfect prince, remain. You are the one who knows that the most beautiful gardens are grown in the darkest soil. The world will never forgive you for succeeding with the very traits they told you to suppress. They will call you a manipulator, a villain, a dark soul. Let them. History is not written by the good or the perfect. It is written by the men who were realistic enough to see the world as it is, and bold enough to use their own brokenness as a battering ram. Go now, take your shame, take your frailty, and take your failures. Stop trying to heal them. Start using them. Build an empire so vast that when men look at your scars, they no longer see a wound. They see the map of a conqueror. The lion does not apologize for his claws, and the fox does not apologize for his cunning. And you You shall never again apologize for the very things that made you a king. The game is yours. Play it without mercy. If this manuscript has awakened the sleeping lion within your soul, do not let the fire go cold. The world is full of spectators who will watch this, nod their heads, and return to their lives of quiet apology. Do not be one of them. If you are ready to stop hiding your scars and start using them to carve out your own empire, then prove your virtue. Subscribe to this chancellery. Join the ranks of those who seek power through realism, not platitudes. Strike the like button, not out of vanity, but to signal to the algorithm that the era of perfection is over and the reign of the strategist has begun. Leave a comment below. Tell me, which weakness have you been hiding that you will now transform into your greatest weapon? I shall read them as I once read the dispatches from the front lines. The ink is dry on this lesson, but the blood is still wet on the battlefield of your life. Go forth and rule. Your empire is waiting. Do not keep it in suspense.